Alright, so the NVIDIA 5000 series GPUs have arrived, codenamed Blackwell. The NVIDIA keynote just wrapped up at CES 2025, and while the gaming aspect of it was arguably the least important part of the keynote, the AI takeover is happening, folks. Let's talk about the GPUs because they had some pretty lofty claims as far as its performance compared to the 4000 series card, namely the 5070 allegedly performing as good as the 4090. Allegedly, and there's some large asterisks around this, so let's talk about it. The primary focus at this NVIDIA keynote was AI. Naturally, right? NVIDIA pretty much runs all the AI software out there. OpenAI, Gemini. And the really big focus here was DLSS 4, their next iteration, next version of DLSS and AI frame generation. This Blackwell architecture promises to deliver much more robust graphical AI generation. And while it's not focused exclusively on the gaming space, there's a bunch of different applications that you talked about as far as manufacturing, robotics, automotive. The big impact here for gaming is the ability to generate much more frames with more fidelity than the 4000 series cards. And this is important because while they didn't announce any of the hard specs at the keynote, the website is up now, and no GPU in this new 5000 series lineup has more than 32 gigabytes, and that's at the $2,000 5090. The RTX 5080 and the 5070 Ti both have 16 gigabytes each, and the RTX 5070, which is coming in at $549, we'll get to the prices in a bit, only has 12 gigabytes of VRAM, and the performance is being compared to the 4090, which has 24 gigabytes of VRAM. So how is that performance comparison possible? Well, it's because they're exclusively focusing on DLSS with RTX on performance. Now, NVIDIA is calling this version of DLSS multi-frame generation, which basically means for every one natively rendered frame, DLSS 4 then creates 3 AI-generated frames, rather up to 3 generated frames for that one rendered frame. So if my math's right, that basically means that you only need about 25% of the raw horsepower of rendering with DLSS 4, and that's how they're making that comparison with lower VRAM. Now, some of the pre-rendered footage that they did showcase at the keynote was impressive, but until we get our hands on these actual cards and compare them in the real world with real world scenarios, we won't really know what that performance comparison actually looks like. But with only 12 gigs of VRAM, you can definitely forget about native 4K rendering for your games. But considering that the quality jumps from each version of DLSS has shown some pretty significant improvements, it's yet to be determined if DLSS 4 is actually up to snuff and if people will actually be able to tell the difference. Now for the pricing, because that's where things kind of get all over the place, the RTX 5090 is clocking in at $1,999, $2,000. That's almost a $500 jump from the 4090, which came in at $1,599. But then the 5080 is clocking in at $999, about $1,000. The 5070 Ti clocking in at $749. Both of these cards have the same amount of VRAM, by the way. And then the 5070 coming in at $549. I don't know if it's a one-to-one comparison to the 4000 series cards where the initial 4070 was really just a 4060. And that's because if DLSS 4 actually performs like they're advertising and it does hit similar performance benchmarks with DLSS and RTX to the 4090, then this honestly might be a steal. There were plenty of gasps and oohs and ahs at the keynote.
Well, now with the Blackwell family, RTX 5070, 4090 performance at $549.
No way.
Now, honestly, as far as VRAM goes, you should definitely expect this path for NVIDIA moving forward with their GPUs, because the true moneymaker for them now, and the reason why their stock has increased so much over the last few years, is because of their AI horsepower. So I think from a business perspective, it only makes sense that they're focusing on AI even on the consumer gaming side of things. So if you can cut manufacturing costs on VRAM per generation of GPUs because you're improving the performance of the software via their AI, then that makes sense, especially when you think about that their entire business model is basically being bet on AI moving forward. Now, for the purists that want the native rendering happening on the GPU with no AI generated frames, I really think you're going to have to start looking elsewhere, because it's not going to be cost efficient to then get their 5090 or 1690 or whatever that flagship GPU is. But since AMD strangely didn't even announce their next generation of cards, even though they reference them at their keynote, we'll see how this plays out. I know gamers can be a fickle bunch, especially on the PC gaming side, but let me know what your thoughts are on these 5000 series cards. Again, until we get our hands on these and can do some real world testing, we don't really know what the true comparisons are as far as rasterization and real rendering compared to the 4000 series or even the 3000 series cards. But let me say, at least in the pre-rendered examples that they showed at the keynotes, the visuals look pretty impressive if they were actually AI generated. All right, CES is just getting started, so we got a lot more content lined up here, so make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching the video. Give it a thumbs up if you want. I am Danny with the DMGT, and I'll catch you next time.